Business AI.
The report says take-up of the technology across England and Wales is incredibly high, with around half of lawyers surveyed reporting they are already using AI technology.
People just don't realise there's an entire new world emerging full of clever new tech that's going to revolutionise the way we do business. The role of the lawyer in particular is changing dramatically.
In total, 126 tech startups have raised venture capital funding in Ukraine since the start of last year, according to PitchBook.
I think lawyers, old school lawyers particularly, think that everything that they do is really, really special and so therefore needs to be bespoke and needs to be done manually in a very artisanal way.
Great legal tech won't replace a great lawyer, but great legal tech in the hands of a great lawyer is game-changing.
This is Legal Disruptors, powered by Summize. Digital contracting done differently.
Hello and welcome back to the Summize Legal Disruptors podcast. I'm Johnny Jessup. I'm a solutions architect at Summize, and today I am delighted to be joined by Marie Widmer. So Marie is an experienced legal ops professional. She's worked at the likes of Pinterest, LinkedIn and HubSpot, and more recently, excitingly started her own program management software company called Amplify Ops. Today, we're going to be talking about her experience as a legal ops professional and also how to ensure a successful implementation of any legal technology and work on getting buy-in from the wider business when purchasing legal tech. All of those processes when purchasing CLM and legal tech especially. So Marie, welcome to the podcast. It is great to have you on. How are you today?
Thank you for having me, Johnny. Really excited to be on. Today is good. It's early over here, so the whole day is ahead of me. Excited to see where it goes.
Thank you for joining me so early. I do appreciate it. Normally when we do these kind of sessions, we start off with a little bit of a getting to know you. So if you could start by just telling the audience a little bit about yourself, basically, how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, happy to. Like most people in legal ops, I kind of had an unconventional path to get here. I really like to call it a happy accident. I was in litigation, realized that wasn't going to be my future, and I ended up going to law school and needed to pay the rent in San Francisco, so I started working as a contracts manager. That very first job led me to doing a Contract Lifecycle Management implementation, and I started hearing on LinkedIn about this cool thing called Legal Ops, and started following and figuring out that this was a real job and I could pursue it, and that's kind of how I got to where I am today. I've done quite a few CLM implementations as both a contractor and a full-time employee, and have some good and bad stories under my belt. So I think that's kind of what drove me to where I am today, to try to find a better way to implement technology.
I see. So I'm working as a contracts manager. I imagine you enjoyed that initial CLM implementation or found enough interest in it to kind of pursue it in terms of career.
I did. It was interesting to be both the person negotiating contracts and implementing the software, because I was experiencing I was the user at the same time I was building the user experience. So it was great because I immediately got the benefits of my own work before anyone else. So I think that's what made me really take a shining to CLM and to legal tech.
I see. And what initially kind of inspired going into the legal profession then? And then what was it, particularly about legal technology? Have you always been a kind of a technology person? You always been into software and processes and that kind of thing?
So legal, I think I like looking at the patterns of things. I like structure and order. Yeah. And even though legal, the more you get into it, the less structure you realize there is. I've always been attracted to the idea that if you follow certain steps or if you build a process, that things will work out the way you expect it to. And I think a lot of lawyers want to believe that if you write a law this way or if you follow the rules, things will work out in a certain way. And I liked the idea of being in a position where I could help people. I worked in a lot of volunteer roles and in service roles prior to entering the legal industry, everything from office management to pet food. So I loved the idea of being able to help people. In terms of technology, no, I flunked out of engineering school in undergrad.
Oh, wow.
So for me to sit here and say that I have anything to do with technology and that I'm building a tech product now is just laughable. I never thought that I would somehow accidentally go from law to software. But for some reason it clicked. So here I am.
I see. I mean, that's incredible. It's one hell of a career jump. It really is. But I mean, legal ops is quite a new profession generally, I think it's fair to say. So, I mean, you said it's been about 4.5 years. So how has it changed from the very start when you were kind of first taking up that side of the role to what it looks like now, both in terms of kind of what the day-to-day jobs have been and the wider kind of knowledge of legal ops as a profession?
Yeah, so in my opinion, the trajectory of the in-house legal department, it really was intended to help, internalize legal services for the business, have a dedicated team, save the company money. I think for a long time, you saw patterns where the in-house legal team was still acting like a law firm and wasn't necessarily working with other units of the business, safeguarding knowledge, a little stuck in their ways in terms of, getting on board with the rest of the company's enterprise technology. Now you've seen the last shift, especially with legal ops, right? The legal department has to work with the rest of the business. They have to be tech savvy. If the rest of the business doesn't really feel that they're approachable or respect the way that they're doing things, then they get cut out of conversations, right? So it's really important for a legal team to have access to early marketing meetings and product meetings and be able to know what's going on with the board and have kind of leadership positions in the company. And they can't really do that if they don't understand how to engage with the rest of the business. Legal ops specifically, I think there's still some struggle. In some departments, you'll see them bring on a legal ops person with the title, but then it's a low paying administrative position, almost as if it's just a rebrand of a paralegal role. And then you've got other departments that have fully embraced the idea of legal operations, which is that it's an autonomous team within legal that does connect legal with the rest of the business and help the legal team run as its own business function. Legal ops, to me, I think, has interests that sometimes even go against the interests of the legal team, in the sense that we care about how the legal team and the business works as a whole. So even if legal doesn't want to move faster, if they don't want to learn new technology or automate, it's the legal ops team's imperative to make sure that that happens and kind of bring them along with them on the journey.
Yeah, no, I absolutely understand and agree with you. I think legal's kind of the last bastion of tech adoption, really, within corporate businesses. And it's interesting you make the link to kind of legal acting almost in silo before, and legal ops maybe being the link between them and the wider business. Have you seen a slightly more open approach to technology since working in legal ops as it started to grow? Because previously lawyers use a lot of Word and that's just about it. But as technologies come on the market, are you starting to see attitudes change?
I am. I think legal ops has had such an influx of funding over the last couple of years that there's just been a lot of marketing driven towards GCs and CLOs and senior leadership on legal teams. So I am seeing more and more senior lawyers have at least a baseline knowledge of the technology that's out there. I've interviewed and met with lawyers who have at least handled one or two tools in their career, and so are starting to understand that it's a necessity. Certainly that's, I'd say 50-50 for me in terms of people I've interacted with right now, but it is improving. There is more curiosity than fear, in my opinion. I know we see a lot of articles saying lawyers are afraid of AI and lawyers are afraid of technology, but honestly, I think most lawyers are cautiously optimistic that it can improve their lives. I think they're more worried about the team's effectiveness in implementing the technology than they are concerned about the technology not working.
Of course. And obviously lawyers are always busy. So any extra task, like a software implementation, takes a lot of bandwidth. And I can imagine there's a lot of fear around, adopting technology just because of the change management process. What do you think could be done, within your average corporate to integrate legal more? Is it a case of building out that legal operations role, or are there other techniques you think that you've seen work in the past to involve legal more in the business process?
So I think legal is staffed with a lot of subject matter experts that could be embedding themselves more in the business if they had the time. What I typically see when I come into in-house teams is you've got people who are incredibly talented in product or privacy or employment law, but because of the amount of manual or just day-to-day work that they have to get done, they don't have time to sit on another 20 hours of calls or be proactive and go hunt down the stakeholders in the business. And I've seen them have, routine syncs with the team, but it does take a little bit more to kind of get themselves embedded in those other pieces of the business and have time each week to that dedicated deep thought and think about how they could be proactive and helpful. But you can't do it when you're buried under work. So I think that's legal ops job, which I've seen legal ops achieve it and I've seen legal ops fail to achieve it, right? Is that you have to free up a big chunk of their work every week and get rid of that manual work, so that not taking it on yourself, but automating it so that they can go do what they do best.
I see. So it all comes down to time then and automation. And I suppose that's why legal operations is so important. So, I mean, if we look at your experience implementing technology, looking at the technology itself and then the process of change management, obviously that can be incredibly painful. What has worked for you in the past? And, if you were to give, your top 5 pieces of advice for any business implementing technology in legal, whether they have dedicated legal ops or not, what would they be?
So my pieces of advice would be, don't rush it. So I've been hired into roles where I was given 2 to 3 months to roll out a spend management program or a CLM program, and you're setting people like, you have to buy a CLM in 2 to 3 months, or you have to get it done. And I understand that, like, I've been in startups, so I understand that those kind of timelines are just seem normal to the rest of the business, but enterprise technology is so risky. If you rush it, if you roll it out wrong, if you waste people's time, the likelihood of getting them to try again and the cost associated with that failure is just too high. So take your time, build a long, careful, thoughtful roadmap, give yourself buffer for, pushback, for, delays, for things to go wrong. So that's a big one. The other one is the relationship development. You can't ever take your hands off the wheel. I've definitely had implementations where I thought, because I got buy-in in the beginning, that we would just coast the rest of the implementation and that the hard part would just be getting the technology done. But you can lose your stakeholders at any point. Even your biggest advocate at day 1 can become your biggest problem 3 months in. Whatever happens during the implementation process, if you're not checking in with them and giving them reassurances that it's going well and asking for their feedback and making sure that you're paying attention to them, you can completely lose them as an ally in the process. The other one, I think, is just being a good customer to your vendor and understanding what that means. So don't always take everything your vendor tells you about the implementation at face value. You need to come with your own knowledge and experience and skills. And you can push back if your vendor says, oh, no, we can get this done really quickly, and you know that you've seen it go wrong. It's okay to have those conversations with your vendor and kind of work that out between the two of you before kind of letting your team see that play out live on Zoom calls and stuff like that. So you do need to be a good advocate for your company and for what you know your needs are, and managing that privately with your vendor so that you're only giving your customers the best experience kind of on the public demo call facing side or implementation facing side. The other one I think that I haven't really gotten to put into practice, which is why I'm starting Amplify, is that this space needs more data. Like, you need to track as much as you can every data point along the implementation. You need to understand every conversation results in data points. Every phase of the implementation results in data points. Every time you onboard a user, that's data that you could be collecting. And if you're missing out on that, then you really don't understand whether your implementation was successful or not. And then I think 5th one is take care of your mental health. This is a service role, and no matter how good the technology is, or no matter how good the implementation goes, you're always going to have someone who doesn't like what's happening, and you're always going to get negative feedback, and it's going to be stressful. You're going to feel emotionally attached to your project and your technology. and you're going to feel like you're letting people down at some point. So just make sure to get outside, get exercise, get therapy, whatever you need. Don't burn yourself out just because an implementation is happening. Because if you end up having to leave the company because you're stressed out or burned out, then the implementation has failed anyways. So.
Yeah, understood. I think that's a really key point. It's very easy to get emotionally attached to a big project, especially when you've taken it from start to finish. It's really interesting stuff there. I think the data points we'll touch on with the Amplify Ops things later. But one thing I'm really interested in is you mentioned the relationships with your different stakeholders. What we often find, I work on a lot of SLM projects. Obviously, we work on a huge amount here at Summize. It's always very interesting where the idea for the project has come from and where the challenges are being seen to exist within a business, whether it is just legal or it's within the commercial team, but also how those different departments get together throughout the scoping, the requirement process. We find it often very, very difficult, especially if you're involving legal and procurement and commercial, because everybody really wants different things. What's been your experience kind of managing all these different departments and making sure that they feel like they're getting what they want from a solution?
It's been interesting. I've been in the position where legal is the only one driving for the product, and so that's been a fairly, the focus there has been trying to bring people into the RFP, get them to participate, get them to care, because it's not initially on their radar that the company needs a CLM. Then I've been on the converse where procurement or sales are the ones that are pressuring for a CLM because of the needs that they have on their team. And then that kind of balances, well, if we're going to get a CLM, it has to work for everybody. And then kind of figuring out how do we run the RFP without one team dominating or making sure that their needs are covered at the expense of other people's needs. So I've been in both situations, and it's hard. Sometimes you win, so to speak, and sometimes you don't. I've definitely had RFPs where I felt incredibly strongly that a certain tool was going to work for everybody and for my team, and that's not where the RFP panned out. So you do ultimately, even though you are the one that's technically, demoing and selecting and recommending the technology, you do at the end of the day have to balance that relationship and, make sure that whatever decision you make, even if it's not 100% what you think is the right choice at the time, it has to be the right choice for all the teams. So that's it's an interesting experience.
Is it hard kind of almost going, well, legal's requirements kind of sit here, and then working out where the rest of the business's requirements sit in terms of priorities? Because it would be great to have the perfect CLM, the perfect legal technology product, but there are going to be different solutions that fit different areas of the business more. Did you come up with any kind of way to prioritize requirements, or how did you address that?
I think in my last role, I think it just came down to which team had, where our KPIs were and which team was technically going to take precedence. It is interesting. It also weighs into and this is what I would caution legal ops that they continue to deal with is we don't necessarily have the same buy-in in the business as a sales team or a procurement team. So even if you are the one that's tasked with spending the money on the technology or selecting it, your voice may not be the loudest in the room. And I think that there's just something you have to accept about that and know how to work with that.
I see. And actually my next question is around getting buy-in. We might as well kind of go there now as you've just mentioned it. So, if we go through, let's say you've gone through your vendor selection process, you're happy with the finalized product. How would you advise the implementation process as you're rolling out to different areas of the business? Because there's a lot of change management, especially if you look at CLM, particularly a huge amount of change management involved in implementing a CLM. How would you kind of recommend managing that process, and any tips?
Yeah, so, long before you buy the technology, you'll have started having conversations with your different departments, your stakeholders, and you'll start to get a sense of their roadmaps, their KPIs, their pressing issues, and really understanding what CLM could solve for them. So it could be that the company has struggled with efficiency in sales and they're lacking the data to understand, where they're losing time with sales contracts, with upmarket. Are we too slow with negotiating our enterprise deals and we're actually losing customers, things like that. So that could be the urgency. And then if you're learning that in the requirements phase, then you already know that that's going to be the team you focus on first with your implementation. Or it could be that the company just onboarded a new procurement department. They're bleeding money. We don't have control over our vendors. We don't even know who our vendors are. There's panic around that, right? So then procurement's going to go first, and that's kind of how you stage the implementation. And then you just make it clear that we're going to implement this technology. Procurement goes first, sales goes second, recruiting goes third, so on and so forth. You kind of give everyone a set time frame, and then you start to give out instructions on what do we need from you to kick off this process. What are the different calls going to be like? What are the phases going to be? You have to really keep it organized in a project charter. I've done it manually, and I've used Asana. I've used different programs. None of them work the way that I would like it to, but that's a different conversation.
I see. But at the end, it's about communicating to everyone and putting together, almost like you say, like a clear roadmap and schedule for who is going to go in which order, and then I presume which areas, which processes you're going to be looking at. Before you implement those, do you have them already drawn out, or is it a case of working with the software vendor and kind of detailing them between you?
Usually by the time I start the RFP, I already have a rough outline of the roadmap and the goals, because I will say, in my opinion, it follows the similar path no matter what vendor you're going with. Then once you've decided to select your vendor, that's when you kind of start to fine tune things, because every vendor has their own idea of how long it's going to take to do certain integrations, right? You might have a vendor who has an out-of-box integration, or maybe it's going to be a custom build. Maybe it'll be webhooks. There's just different factors that you can then adjust your timeline and set expectations on the teams as to what needs to happen.
I see. That's really interesting, and I think really useful. I think collaboration between different departments when implementing and buying a CLM is incredibly key, and sometimes it can just be seen as a legal problem. Sometimes, other departments are needed to gather the budget. It really does vary, but having control over that kind of holistically is really important. From the business then, when you had these initial conversations, something we're always interested in is obviously legal have oversight of the contracting process, procurement normally as well. But what do kind of commercial people, your internal customers, say to you that leads you to realize that CLM has to happen and you have to put in place that process? What are those kind of scenarios that you've seen? What are the horror stories that happen before this kind of process starts?
Yeah, I think the reality is that legal, whether they like it or not, they sit on all of the knowledge of the company. They know where all the bodies are buried. They know where all the corporate paperwork is. They know where all the signed contracts are. And if you don't have that organized, and if you don't have some easy way to access it, what happens is legal is continuously bombarded with requests from different pieces of the company, right? So sales wants to know what the risk is for making, a change to our enterprise sales contracts, or letting a customer have a certain exemption here, but not doing it with another customer. Well, you're forcing legal every single time to do full-on research as if it's like a case. If they don't have it all at their fingertips and the data isn't already there and the documents are all stuffed away in random G Drive folders, your legal is continuously in a reactive state, and you're increasing the likelihood of a risk of misinformation or a mistake being made. And you're also just continuing to reinforce the idea that the other lines of the business don't think for themselves. They have to go to legal every time, and then whatever the answer is, that's a bespoke answer, and then they have to go back to legal again. So there's no education, there's no continuity, and there's no history, because usually that's all buried in emails. So I think a lot of teams feel frustrated with legal because of it, because you're not giving them any empowerment. You're just giving them an answer with very little context behind it. And of course, legal's frustrated on their end, because what someone else sees as an email from legal, maybe even a terse email, has been like a whole panic of yelling at people, sorting through documents. Where is it? So that's when, immediately if I go into a company or I interview at a company and I ask, like, do you know where all your contracts are stored? And they go, oh, well, I think we have a box folder here and a G Drive folder. Immediately, I'm like, okay, I know where we're at. You need a CLM. And even if not a full blood CLM, you need the basic version of it. You know, you can CLM to me can be as simple as like a manual version until you're ready to buy a tool. And that's like organizing your G Drive, getting everyone in one DocuSign, having some sort of tracker, whether it's like a Zapier attachment to your email. You know, it can be a build your own CLM until you're ready to buy one.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. I mean, a part of the problem we always find is, like you say, you go in, where are your contracts? And they're probably stored in a lot of businesses across several different places. You almost have to have a bit of an amnesty at the start of people putting them all in the same place so they can be evaluated. And that's always the first thing in order to get that knowledge. I think it was what you said around the rest of the business being reliant on legal for those types of answers. I think we're seeing a theme of self-service, particularly within legal tech, being incredibly important. Like you say, giving legal more time to remove some of those kind of high volume, low value tasks. But in the end of the day, it's really improving the rest of the business and allowing your internal customers to kind of grow and sharing that knowledge that has been within legal's keeping. That's really, really interesting. I'd like to hear really your opinion on AI as well. So AI is obviously being talked about over the last 9 months everywhere. You've said from your experience, lawyers are starting to get excited by the possibilities of it, albeit cautiously. How do you see that changing over the next couple of years? Do you kind of see a wide scale adoption or something a little bit more gradual?
Yeah, you know, I think AI is something that I think lawyers are going to adopt. But again, I think it ties into the pain points we're seeing with the current technology on the market, which is that, like, and this is technology is getting better, but the way we implement it isn't getting better. Change management is not improving. And the data around change management is not improving. So I think, like, we can bring AI on the teams, but if they've already had poor experiences with a CLM implementation, for example, or a spend management implementation, they're going to be less likely to adopt the AI because they know that when the AI comes with the legal ops team that did a bad job of implementing the CLM in the first place. So they're like, okay, more trainings, I have to take more time out of my week. So we've got to continue to put as much effort and emphasis into improving how we deliver technology as like how we build it. Because you can build the best tool on the market and you can give lawyers the best AI on the market. But if you don't do a good job onboarding them into it, if you don't make it, as you said, self-service and seamless and easy to jump in and start experimenting safely, then they're just going to back out and we'll be right back where we were before.
I see. So in your view, it all still comes down to that change management piece, and the data behind it. I think it's a good time maybe to bring in your new venture founding, Amplify Ops. So where, firstly, I can imagine where it's come from, your implementations of software products and that change management process working in it. So can you tell us a little bit more about it? So what kind of challenges are you seeing? Where is the kind of direct solution for them, and how is it growing, and what are your plans?
Yeah, so my co-founder and I have done more than our fair share of implementations, and kind of like I pointed out, I just don't think that it's getting better. The failure rate for legal tech is really high in terms of implementations. It's sitting at, there was the Contract Work survey said about 70%, and then I ran a survey, an implementation survey earlier this year, and I think my number was 62%. My data also shows that teams are spending between like CSM hours and consultants, they're spending over $100,000, and that's on a small implementation. They're spending about 20 hours a month on manual work during the implementation. So that's like updating calendars, updating, the project charter doc. So just like the amount of manual work it takes to keep the project moving in terms of, I'm sure you've experienced this yourself, right? You get into the project and you've got procurement, you've got sales, you've got recruiting, you've got your own internal legal team, and you have to continuously keep everyone on the same page. After every meeting, after every Slack message, every side thread has to get pulled back into the main thread. You've got other people starting their own documents, having their own side conversations. It gets to the point where you start to really lose sight of the bigger picture, because there's just so much going on in the day-to-day. And you start to lose the ability to see patterns. So I've been in implementations where I did all the prep work. The tool is great. The team that I was working with was great. But there was so much noise that it got to the point where we started to really lose track of why we were doing it and what we were doing, and lose the ability to kind of feel out which team members we were kind of losing buy-in from. Because the amount of time we were having to spend just updating our project charter and Asana board, it really just kind of ate away from our time to really spend continuing to get buy-in and maintain those relationships. So Amplify we're building AI into project management, and the goal is to automate a lot of that. So the AI will suggest your roadmap for you. It'll populate the tasks. You can bring in your CSMs and your consultants into the platform. It'll follow you along the project. We're going to be partnering with some other companies to try to start to build data points around it to help identify when your project's going off track. So we'll integrate, and you'll be able to schedule your calls. Not only that, but you'll start to see patterns, right? So you'll see who's missing calls. You'll be able to say who's looking at the Google Doc and who's not, who's watched the training videos and who's not. Start to identify patterns and where you're losing people and the success of your onboarding.
I see. That's really interesting. It's also, I imagine, using that data then, going back to the start of the project, to then give stakeholders, both senior and otherwise, a realistic perspective on what the implementation is going to look like what is normal, how you can report against that, and it all starts, like you say, with gathering the data and actually using the data sensibly. That sounds super exciting. Looking forward to hopefully seeing how it works on some Summize projects going forward as well. You never know, that'd be good. So that's what's next for yourself, Marie. But the last question I want to ask you, and it is a little bit, projecting to see what might happen, but legal ops has come a long way in the last 5 years. So if we were to jump forward, let's say another 5 years, what do you expect the profession to be like? Do you think there'll be a legal ops department in every single kind of large corporate? Are there going to be are there particular new ideas now you see really bearing fruit in the next couple of years? What do you reckon it's going to look like?
Yeah, so I think legal ops will take the shape of more standard ops teams. You have sales ops and rev ops and procurement ops, and I think that it will become more standard to have ops professionals with set roles embedded in each legal team. I think right now we're still in this phase where every legal ops department looks a little different. The titles are all over the place. In the next couple of years, I think we're going to start to see standardized education and maybe certifications for legal ops, kind of similar to privacy, right? Privacy wasn't a field. And then all of a sudden there was dedicated privacy counsel roles and privacy program manager roles, and it kind of exploded and became this huge opportunity for professionals to move into a brand new high paying role. But until they really rolled out IAPP and the CIPP exams, you didn't really know what you were looking for in terms of a valuable privacy candidate. So I think we're going to see that with legal ops as well. We're going to see certifications and a standard job description and a standard, you're going to be able to look at a resume and know whether someone can succeed in a legal ops role right now or not, which right now it's hit or miss. You've got people with 2 years of experience with a director role, and you've got people with 10 years of experience in an analyst role. And it's just kind of a crapshoot right now. So
yeah, I mean, so standardization across the board then.
And with that, I think will come more success and more stability for the legal tech vendors as well. I think with more trust in legal ops and more standardization in that area, you're going to see each team adopting a uniform set of technology. I think we're just still scratching the surface with teams in terms of adopting CLM, especially like outside of the US. There's a lot of markets, even in the UK, I think is still fairly new. And EMEA still has a lot of information that they haven't gotten yet in terms of rolling out CLM and kind of the standard package of legal tech.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that definitely in the UK, legal ops is an even newer profession than it is in the US. And I think you're absolutely right. Hit the nail in the head by saying that with legal ops professionals becomes a much more standard process for buying and implementing legal tech in general, and a standard kind of suite of products that every business will need to have and expect over time. It's very, very exciting, and
one plug I'll say for, I'd love to give a positive thing to say for Summize is that I think one of the things you're going to see is one of the things I've had issue with CLM is a lot of CLMs have rolled out and they've built CLM the way that they envision it working, and it requires a lot of change management because you have to use their method of intake, their method of signature, their method of data storage, right? And it's not as modular. And I think that the future of CLM and legal tech is not going to be built just for the benefit of the lawyers, because that's not going to get us anywhere. It has to be built to work with the rest of the enterprise. So having a modular tool that you can plug in day one with Slack, with G Drive, with Teams, that is essential, because you're not really building it for the legal department as much as we think we are. It's really so that the legal department can interact with the rest of the business. So if you can't work with the rest of the enterprise tooling quickly and easily, whether it's like webhooks or out-of-box integration, if you're not built to kind of plug and play from day one, then it's going to be a difficult sell.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we've found since, we integrated with Slack and Teams, amongst others, probably about 18 months ago. And it was at that point, and then as that gets adopted throughout the business, you realize what the problem was maybe in the first place, and it was collaborating between your internal customers and your legal team, and working out where everybody sits in that part of the process. And it makes so much more sense coming to meet people in a virtual office setting through an integration. And I think everybody hates being given a new product with a new login that has to be part of their day-to-day. That's another check that they have to do first thing in the morning. And we use Teams here internally for collaboration, communication, and that's where everything sits that I do on a day-to-day basis most of the time. So adding a workflow into Teams or Slack or whatever you're using for communication internally just has huge benefits in terms of automation and project success and people actually using it, which is what we're looking for at the end of the day. People to adopt technology and see the benefits. And
that's where AI is going to be most successful anyways, right? Like if you can add AI to your platform, but if people still have to log in and learn to be a professional in their platform to get access to it, that's where there's going to continue to be issues. It needs to be easily accessible in the tools they're already working in.
Absolutely. So part of our roadmap over the next year is working out where OpenAI integrations sit, where they can be best utilized. And I think, it's important to do that cautiously and to work out where people are needing AI and automation, the potential of automation to have the highest impact is, rather than necessarily giving you a separate AI tool that kind of sits alongside everything else that you're not really sure when or where you should be using. So it's very interesting, and I say having legal ops professionals like yourself to organize this, just to organize businesses that are implementing these types of technology, get everybody, like you say, on the same page is vitally important. So, that's it for today. Thank you so much, Marie, for joining us.
Thank you.
Super useful. We're going to come out with a whole list of tips, pieces of advice for all our audience to focus on when they're implementing a CLM. So thank you very much for your time and for joining us today.
Thank you. It was great to chat.